CBS 17 Sports Extra is presented by Honda Dealers of the Carolinas.
Ooh, welcome to another week of CBS 17's Black and Blue Huddle. Casley Sims, Alyssa Ray. As I say every week, we've got a lot to talk about. Not so much on the Panthers. They aren't playing too well. The 5-8 Panthers will visit. Well, the 5-8 Panthers will be at home this week versus the 10-3 Seattle Seahawks. Two teams going in opposite directions. Seattle playing for playoff position. Carolina playing for more so draft pick position. Right. They're coming off of a 40-20 loss versus the Atlanta Falcons, dropping them to 1-4 in their division. What do you see from that game last week, man?
It was brutal. 40-20 was the final, and the Panthers looked bad in all three phases. You would hope there was some shining light, and really we couldn't find any. They held Christian McCaffrey to 53 yards rushing. We know he had 80-some yards receiving, which at this point, Christian McCaffrey is just playing for, I think, stats, and he's chasing records. But besides that, I mean, they held him to, like I said, 53 yards rushing. Couldn't really get much done, and the defense really surprising. I know there are a lot of spots that are banged up here across the entire team. The offensive line dealing with a lot too. But to see that score was pretty frustrating as a Panthers fan. I'm sure they're thinking, like, our defense just allowed 40 points. We have one of the best linebackers in the league in Luke Kuechly. Yeah. You have a good line. You have Gerald McCoy you picked up. I know a lot of pieces there that should just be better. Shaq Thompson did sign a big contract this week, which is a big deal. So they're keeping him around, and he's a shining light, and that's a good thing. They're keeping him in Charlotte. But as far as the game, not a lot of good to come out of it, except maybe it's a regroup. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, not a lot from it either. I thought Christian McCaffrey was going to do a lot better than what he did. Falcons give up a lot of yards on the ground and through the air. So I thought he would do better. 53 yards. I mean, he hasn't played well versus divisional opponents this year. And that Panthers defense you mentioned, they've given up 24 points or more in six of their last 7 games. Not good for them, especially going into the offseason or, trying to find some momentum going into the offseason. I think they need to play better. This week could be a good opportunity for them to play spoiler, maybe get off to, a good start towards the offseason and whatnot. Yeah.
And they've been they have one of the worst run defenses in the league, and we've said that, and we know that. It's established. I mean, teams are running all over the Panthers right now, but they actually have been decent against dual-threat quarterbacks, so that's a shining light. And we realize Russell Wilson can do damage through the air. He's thrown for more than 3,400 yards so far. He has 26 touchdowns. I mean, the guy is he's an MVP candidate, not like anyone's taking it from Lamar Jackson at this point, but he was in the conversation, and for good reason. But against Kyler Murray, they did okay. Yeah. The Panthers are okay against a dual threat quarterback. Yeah. Again, this is kind of a banged up defensive line, so that's to be determined.
I mean, outside of Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson to me is the most dangerous dual threat quarterback.
Yes.
But Russell Wilson, he gets it done more to me with his arm. He doesn't make too many mistakes. He throws a lot of touchdowns. When you look at his stats, I think he only has 5 interceptions on the year. Yeah. So he does a good job of taking care of the ball. It's going to be on that Panthers secondary to maybe, shake them up a bit and maybe get some sacks. I mean, the Panthers defensive line has been pretty good this year. Seattle isn't known for having a good offensive line, so maybe if they can get in Russell Wilson's face, they can create some problems for him as well. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and the Panthers are also, we talk about, no, they're not going to the playoffs. There's no hope of that at this point. But they're still fighting for their jobs. I mean, David Tepper made a statement. He let go of Ron Rivera, who had a decent record in Carolina. He's a good coach. He's going to get another coaching job, if not defensive coordinator position. These guys need their paycheck. They need their job, and they need to prove to David Tepper why they belong on this team. I think Shaq Thompson getting a contract kind of showed, hey, we are invested in certain players, but this is going to be a new look next year, and it's going to be a whole different look next year. And along those lines, Cam Newton did have a successful surgery this week. His future is still up in the air as well.
Yes, it is very much in the air. I mean, like I mentioned, whenever a new owner or GM comes in, they want their own quarterback. They want their own pick at coach, things like that. So as we've discussed so many times, I don't expect to see Cam Newton back next year. It'll be interesting to see what they do at quarterback. Maybe they draft one. Maybe they trade for one. They've got one sitting on the bench that they drafted last season, Will Greer.
Yep.
I don't know what they'll do with him. I think they should throw him in there, maybe, let him take his licks, throw a couple interceptions, touchdowns, whatever.
Yeah.
Just let him get his feet wet pretty much.
Will Greer had a great college career, starting at Florida, then transferred to WVU. He was a great college quarterback.
Yes, he was.
I know the problem with him in the preseason was he is not very responsible with the ball, but you look at Kyle Allen, and now it's like, well, here we are. Kyle Allen had, 3 turnovers Sunday? And so at this point, what's there to lose? So I talked to Mark Thomas. He's our NFL insider. He appears on the show each week. We have long conversations about certain things, and I always get his perspective being a former player. And I said, what do you think? What would be the downfall of playing Will Grier, getting him in, getting him some reps when really this doesn't matter? And he made a good point. He said the offensive line is the problem here. You don't want to put in a 3rd-round pick, have him get banged up, and the future of maybe at least, I don't see him being the franchise quarterback, but at least he could be a backup for a long time, or at least someone that they can put in when they need him. You don't want to put a rookie in, get killed, get hurt, and it's low for morale at this point. It's like, just keep Kyle Allen in, let him finish the season, regroup next year, and hopefully they have a whole new brand going on for the Carolina Panthers, and I think that's what the front office is looking for.
I mean, like I mentioned earlier, when you spend a 3rd-round pick, which isn't a low pick and isn't too high, but it's, one of those mid-round picks. When you spend a 3rd-round pick on a quarterback, you're pretty serious about him. So I think at this point, Kyle Allen, he's been throwing a bunch of interceptions, fumbling the ball, as you mentioned. If Will Grier gets in there and does the same thing, it's kind of like, it's been going on for a while anyway.
Right.
But at least he's getting that experience. At least he's getting his confidence up, or, hopefully it works for him. I don't know if he's the future, but.
And maybe they could fix the root of the problem, which at this point is the offensive line. I mean, it's not like Kyle Allen's he's not doing terrible, but he's not getting a lot of help up front. And they really need that line to help him out and kind of guide him and let him get a little more time in the pocket and execute some good throws. And you can't blame it all on him, but the offensive line as well.
Yeah, I agree. Seattle, like I said, fighting for playoff position. I don't know what the Panthers can do this week to get a win. There are no moral victories in football already, and definitely this week for a team going in the way that they are, there's definitely no moral victories. So maybe they can steal one. Maybe they can play spoiler. I don't know. But speaking of spoiler alert, I got killed by Lamar Jackson last night in fantasy football.
Oh, no!
Playing against him in the fantasy semis.
Oh.
Lamar Jackson and Jamison Crowder, who plays for the Jets, he had 2 touchdowns. So it's not looking good for me in the playoffs right now. I don't know.
Better than me. I don't even know if I'm still in the consolation side. I think
Really?
I'm even out of that, yeah.
Well, it is what it is.
My fantasy
It's always the next
has
year.
not been well this year.
Yeah. But yeah, as I said, it is the fantasy semis. So hopefully these picks this week, our 3 stardoms and our 3 situms, will give you some insight on who to start this week as you try to, get to that championship, maybe win some money, win some bragging rights, anything like that. Stardom, situm. Here we go. First up, Tennessee Titans quarterback Ryan Tannehill. Well, it's the fantasy football playoffs for probably every league there is. So if you're looking for someone to have in a nice spot start, Ryan Tannehill is your guy. Although Tannehill has been putting up numbers worthy of a season-long starter, many people have not realized that until now. I'm one of those people. Since taking over as a starter, he's thrown for multiple TDs in 5 out of 7 starts, and is a good bet to exceed 300 passing yards. Tannehill will be playing in a key AFC South matchup. The winner of this game may likely win the division, so the Titans will need Tannehill to be on his A-game. Fortunately, the Texans' secondary is soft and should allow for Tannehill to put up some solid numbers. They allow the 27th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Need a surefire boost at the quarterback position this week? Start Tannehill. Next up, Seattle Seahawks running back Chris Carson. This week's pick for running back was kind of tough, but once you look at the matchups, a glaring one sticks out. Chris Carson's Seahawks will get to face an old friend in the Carolina Panthers, who rank dead last in fantasy points and touchdowns allowed to running backs. Beware, Carson has been sharing the backfield with teammate Rashad Penny and has had some fumbling issues this season. A fumble in this one might put him in Pete Carroll's doghouse, causing him to sit for an extended time. But let's hope for the best for Carson. It's a marvelous matchup. First up, Los Angeles Rams wide receiver Robert Woods. Robert Woods has been on fire in the past 4 weeks, scoring at least 15 fantasy points in each of those contests. The Cowboys aren't the best matchup on paper, but this game has the makings of a classic shootout, and with Woods being one of quarterback Jared Goff's favorite targets, expect to see a ton of him. Dallas has been shaky as of late as they've allowed 7 touchdowns and the third most fantasy points of wide receivers over the past 4 weeks. This point in the year is all about playing chess in the fantasy playoffs, so if you have Woods, make sure he's locked in for this week.
You put Chris Carson in there, I see.
Alyssa was giving me some flack for putting Chris Carson in there. I couldn't help it. Panthers ranked dead last in touchdowns allowed and fantasy points given up.
And Carson's been sneaky good. He has over 1,000 yards rushing. He really came onto the scene when the starter got hurt, so he's in. He's been doing well. I don't blame you, but I was like, really? In the Panthers?
Yeah, he's 8th in the league in rushing yards, so if the Panthers want to win this week, stopping Carson will be a key to doing so.
Yeah, and of course, we love hanging out with you guys here on Facebook on Fridays. Our Black and Blue Huddle show airs here in Raleigh on Saturdays at 11:30 p.m. It's right after 11 o'clock newscast. So we have a lot of interviews, we have a lot of insights. Chris Clark is on there, Gibby's on there. So we have a lot of deep thought into that one and a lot of good stuff. We have Fan of the Week, Panther of the Week, lots of good stuff going on. So join us every week, Saturdays at 11:30. Check your local listings. If you're not in Raleigh, but if you are, it's 11:30 on Saturdays.
You heard her. For another week of Black and Blue Huddle, Casley Sims, Alyssa Ray. See you next week.